So you want to become a landlord. That is brilliant news. And over the next few weeks, I hope to be giving you some hints and tips and guidance as to what you need to look for, how you need to approach it, and really, as initially, is it the right thing for you? Over the years, I've made quite a few mistakes and I've learnt by them. And it's those lessons that I want to pass on to you. So let's get started. Welcome to our guide for property investment, part 2, key considerations. In part 1, we looked at really whether you should be a landlord or not, getting you to ask yourself the questions that really are quite important to make sure it's going to be right for you, because that's the most important thing. So I expect since you got this far, the answer was yes. Brilliant. So this time we're going to be looking at the key considerations. And we're going to be covering off the type of properties you should be looking at and finance and leasehold and freehold. So let's get started. So first of all, your budget. What are you actually aiming at? It really surprises me that sometimes people come in, they're looking for a rental property, they've got a rough idea. And the thing you've got to look at is, okay, if you've got a lump sum, how are you going to split that up? Are you going to buy a number of properties? Are you going to buy it outright with cash? How are you going to split the money that you've got to make it work for you? That really is the first thing that you need to look at. So have a chat with a financial advisor before you start. The second one is second consideration is the type of landlord you want to be. And I know that you're going to say, I want to be the best landlord there is. And I would agree with you. But the thing is, it depends on the type of property that you're going to buy and the type of contract that you're going to have with your tenants. So let's just have a look at a couple of those. So first of all, serviced accommodation is very much what it says. It's an absolute concierge service. It would be fully furnished. You're going to have to bear in mind with regard to sort of cleaning, make sure that you've got extra linen, and also where it is, because if it's in the middle of nowhere, it's very unlikely that people will want decent serviced accommodation. So you're most probably looking at nearer town centres, or if there's some big construction going on, near the construction site. We certainly had dealing with a lot of serviced accommodation whilst the A14 was being dealt with. So that's ended now. So again, you have to bear that in mind. The next type of property that you could look on is holiday lets. It is, as they say, you usually would set up if people were there on a longer term basis, they wouldn't be there for more than 10 months living at the property. And you also need to make sure with holiday lets that your lease allows it, and also whether the council allow holiday lets in the property. Holiday lets, you're going to have to be near somewhere where people want to be on holiday. I know it sounds really, really straightforward, but you'd be again surprised where people think, great, got a bargain in the middle of nowhere. It's not going to be a great pull from holiday let. Again, here, what you've got to be looking at is, could you get more than 56% occupancy? Because really that is the sweet spot for most holiday lets. And then we go on to HMOs. So the houses of multiple occupancy. You'll hear people talk about house of multiple occupancy, if I could say it would help, and actually achieving anything between 8 to 12% return. And that is true. In Cambridge, they're the sort of figures that you would be looking at. However, the costs of running an HMO are far higher than anything else we're going to be talking about. And also the legislation is far more ingrained. Whether it's going to be a licensed HMO, an unlicensed HMO, how many people you've got there. Those people will change on a regular basis. And sometimes it's a bit like herding cats to get, let's say, 5 people who are all living together and they all fall out because someone's stealing someone's cheese. It happens, believe me. So they're the sort of things that you've got to really look out for at HMOs. And I suppose in some respects that goes on to student lets. We're in Cambridge, so student lets, yeah, you'd say, great, I could do that. With student lets, you're going to be, the students will be there only during term times. So what's going to happen is you will be decorating the place, making sure it's all ready out of term times. Student lets, do have a bit of bad publicity because it's the first time this 19-year-old has been let loose from home, and so you've got to bear that in mind. You could go for the master's students, more mature students, but again, what you've got to be aware of, particularly in Cambridge, is that different colleges are actually building quite a bit of their own student accommodation. So before you go down that road or think of buying one, just see what's actually on the market outside of term times. That will give you an idea of what is available and how things are going. And then the most usual contract, which is an assured short hold tenancy, an AST. It's the one that mortgage companies usually ask for. They'll ask for a 12-month AST, and sometimes mortgage companies will actually stipulate the type of tenant that you can have. So you do have to be aware of that. I mean, there is a nationwide kickback on not allowing benefit or tenants that are having their rent paid on benefit. So just be aware of what your mortgage says. With an AST in St Ives area, St Ives and Huntingdon, those market towns, you could get, with an AST contract, you're most probably looking at anything from a 4 to 5% return. In Cambridge, at the moment, you're looking at a 3% return. But with Cambridge, you're certainly looking at, let's say, higher capital asset growth, which leads me on to the next thing that you may be looking at. Do you want capital asset growth or do you want rental income return? Well, as I said, if you're looking at the Cambridge scenario, you may be going, well, 3% return, I will get that, but my capital asset growth is going through the roof. And it has over the last 15 years, through the financial crisis, through everything that was going on, basically capital asset in the Cambridge area, the CBs, absolutely 100%. Also, the type of thing that you would need to be aware of whilst we're talking about capital asset growth is where you would buy a property. For example, we've got the Cambridge-Oxford train line being talked about at the moment, and we've got a possible station in Camborne North, Camborne South. Nothing's set, but maybe it's something that you want to actually have a look at, because if you're buying a property which isn't by a railway station yet, but in 5 years' time it will be, quid seen, you've actually made a good deal there. And the next thing with regard to key considerations is, are you going to buy leasehold or freehold? So difference, freehold, you own the land, and leasehold, you're leasing that property. So there's pros and cons for both, but what you've got to be aware of is leasehold. You will have a service charge and ground rent, which again, if you're looking at your rental return, that's going to reduce the rental return. With leasehold, you've got to check the lease to make sure that there are no caveats in there that you have to pay a certain amount every time you change the tenancy. And also you've got to see what you can't do in your leasehold. We've had landlords who've bought properties and it's quite clear on leasehold that clothes cannot be hung up and hung out on balconies, which actually have upset tenants. So again, you've just got to be aware of what's going on. Financially though, as I said, you'd have to bear in mind it's reducing your rental income on the leasehold side. However, with that service charge, with the leasehold service charge, you're going to have your outside repainted, you're going to have the roof looked after, which if you were going freehold, you're going to have to do it yourself. So again, it very much depends, and it depends very much on the type of person that you want to attract. So both have their merits, but you just need to be aware of maybe the more of the downside on the leasehold side of things. And finally, key consideration is how much time you want to spend on your property portfolio. I'm not going to say you have to use an agent, because there are many landlords that are very good at managing their own properties. However, they have to be, and they are aware of the legislation. There are 179 pieces of legislation that affect landlord and tenant law. This autumn, we're expecting the Renters Reform Bill coming in, which will change Section 21s. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, that's the type of thing that you need to be aware of. With regard to testing out an agent, if you need one, what's the best way to do it? First of all, I'd ring them up as a tenant. I'd try and get a viewing and find out how they actually market your property or market a property, whether that's right for you. Second test is I'd ask them about legislation. What do they know? What's the most recent piece of legislation that they've had to deal with? How did they deal with it? Also, what's important is how many people they have looking after the property. What do I mean by that? You could have a one-man band who basically does everything for their landlords. You could have a larger company who've got a number of people looking after the property. Really what I'm saying is what you need to make sure is if your tenant has an issue and they ring at 10 o'clock at night, there is going to be someone there to actually make sure things can be sorted out. So that's the end of key considerations. I hope it's been of help. Please join us again next week when we actually look at the type of property that you could buy. And thank you very much for watching.